Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then welcome. I hope you guys are all having an incredible day today. So in today's Mystery Monday, we're going to be talking about a really crazy case. Actually, it's about this guy who went missing and then was found alive after 23 years. It's a bit of a roller coaster, so strap in, buckle up. Before we get into it though, I just want to thank today's sponsor Casetify for making this video possible. Apple just released the new iPhone 13 and I just want to say a massive thank you to Casetify for gifting it to me. The new phone has a 20% smaller notch, it's got new colors, it's got a brighter display, and the new camera is amazing. It has macro mode, it has cinematic video mode, which have been so much fun to play around with. If you guys are planning on getting the new phone, you should definitely check out Casetify to get a case to protect it. They already have a ton of cases for the iPhone 13s, they're customizable, they have a ton of different designs, so there's really something for everybody. This pink heart case is my absolute favorite. I have not taken it off since I got the new phone. I just think it's so cute. I also got the mirror case, of course, because you guys know I love this case. I had to get one for my new phone. And then I also just got a clear one because I want to show off my new sexy phone. The new Casetify cases for the iPhone 13 are made from 65% recycled and plant-based materials. The new cases are just as amazing and protective. The Ultra Impact cases are still approved for drops of up to 9.8 feet. They're also wireless charging and 5G compatible. And the Impact and Ultra Impact cases are 100% BPA free, they're 100% non-toxic, non-hazardous, and they also have an antimicrobial coating which kills 99% of bacteria. So if you guys are interested in checking out any of the Casetify cases for yourself, for a new phone, maybe a gift for friends or family with the holiday season coming up, you can get a cheeky 15% off if you go to casetify.com/Bella. I will leave all of the information in the description down below, and speaking of cases, let's go ahead and get into today's case. So like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about a guy who went missing for 23 years. Like, this guy was pronounced dead officially because they were like, if we haven't found him after this long, then the chances of him being alive is pretty slim to none. So he was pronounced dead, and then 23 years later, they actually found him alive. This guy's name was Richard Hoagland. He was from Indiana and he worked for an insurance company, and he was married to a second wife at the time, a woman named Linda Isler, who he married in 1982. Together they had two sons, Matthew, who was 9 years old at the time, and Douglas, who was 6 years old. And as far as anyone knew, they had a pretty good life. His job paid really well enough that he was able to afford a 5-bedroom house outside Indianapolis. He had a speedboat that he kept tied up at a nearby lake. He wore a lot of designer suits, and they often went on vacations to a lot of exotic locations. His wife Linda described him as a guy who was a lot of fun. He was high energy and a very positive person, and you know, life was good for Richard and his family. But then at 4:45 p.m. on the 10th of February in 1993, Richard calls his wife from work, who was also at work. She worked at a medical center, and he says, look, I'm feeling really unwell. I think I'm going to go to the hospital. Linda is obviously really worried, so she offers to go and pick him up and take him to the hospital, and he's like, look, I just don't have time to wait for you, and he hung up the phone. He never told her what hospital he was going to be going to, and Linda was obviously freaking out. And then on top of that, when she left work, she went and picked up Douglas from daycare like she normally did, but when she came home, Matthew was actually home alone, and normally Richard would be there looking after him, but he had left him at home alone, and all of Richard's things were still at home. His toothbrush, his passport, his coat. It was a cold day out, it was February, and all of his stuff was still at home. So she was worried about him. She wanted to check on him, make sure he was okay. She hadn't heard from him, so she called all of the hospitals in the area, and none of them had any record of a Richard Hoagland ever being there. A few hours later, she gets a call from Richard, and he basically says, I can't live this way anymore. You would be better off without me. And then he hung up. And then a few hours later, he called up again, and he was like, I don't want to go to jail. I can't do this anymore. I'm never coming back. And then he hung up again. And then he called another time, and the same thing sort of happened where he would just say what he needed to say, and then he hung up. So Linda went and filed a complaint with the police, who tracked the calls, and one of the calls came from Venezuela, one came from Aruba, and one came from Florida, which was obviously super weird, definitely very sketchy, so police immediately started searching for him. And then a few days after his disappearance, police actually found his car in the car park of the Indianapolis airport, which they believe had been abandoned. So they call up all the airlines, lines, and it turns out that no Richard Hoagland had flown out of Indianapolis that day or in the few days since Richard's disappearance. The disappearance was obviously really hard on Linda and the kids for a bunch of reasons, obviously. I mean, the kids, for a while there, they just thought it was something that was just gonna blow over and their dad would just come home one day and everything would be normal. But Richard was also the main source of income for the family, and as it turned out, he was not doing so hot financially. He had maxed out all of their credit cards, and he had even forged Linda's signature for a loan before the disappearance. And Linda couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments, the car payments, the credit card bills, the boys' education. She actually lost the house, she lost the car, she lost everything, and had to file bankruptcy and move in with her parents. So Linda filed for divorce, which the judge granted, and he ordered that Richard had to pay off his debts. He had to pay his unpaid taxes, his different loans, his 26 unpaid credit card debts, which he obviously never returned to do. Then the summer following the disappearance, things got even weirder because Matthew and Douglas received birthday cards from Richard which had $50 in cash in them, and this was obviously super confusing for them because they didn't know where he was, what happened to him, and because he just vanished off the face of the literal planet, they didn't know if it was actually their dad that sent the cards. In one of the cards, Richard wrote, "Doug, have a super birthday. You are a super boy. I love you and miss seeing you. Let your mum help spend this money. You might want to put some away. Maybe sometime soon we will get to see each other. I bet I won't even know you. It has been so long. Mind your mother." So the police start looking into these cards and they start to think that Linda might be involved, that maybe she set the whole thing up and had murdered Richard herself and just sent these cards to kind of, I don't know, throw police off or something, or make her kids feel better that their dad wasn't dead. There were all these different theories that Linda had murdered him, that maybe Richard was caught up in some drug business or some shady business, and so he had to get away for his own safety, and maybe Linda had helped him escape and was keeping his whereabouts a secret. They speculated that the whole thing was set up so that they could escape their financial burdens, that Richard disappeared first and Linda and the kids were going to go follow. They were really convinced that Linda was in some way involved. They questioned and interrogated her a bunch, but they could never come up with any solid evidence to link her to Richard's disappearance. Also at around this time, Linda started to get really paranoid and was freaking out, thinking that somebody was following her. All of the mail that she would receive would be opened but then resealed. There were cars constantly parked outside her house, and things inside the house would move around even when she knew nobody was home. And then one day her dad actually found a recording device attached to the phone line, and she started freaking out. She thought that maybe Richard was involved in some shady business dealings with some shady people, and that's why he had to leave and disappear, and that maybe they were after her now as well. And she was really worried for the safety of her boys, so she took her parents, and they all went to live in McCordsville in Indiana. She put everything in her parents' name so that no one would be able to track her, and she even had Matthew and Douglas catch the school bus from a friend's house so that no one would be able to follow them and find out where they live.
She's our daughter, and I'm a parent, and I had to help her.
Do you want to listen to my stories? Huh? You come to listen to my stories. Do you know how long they lived like that for? For 6 months.
And they lived like that for 6 months until she was like, enough is enough. It's probably been long enough that, it's blown over by now. We can go back and try and live life like normal. But it just wasn't the case. They went back, they tried to live life normally, and she said for the next few years she felt paranoid. The police were still watching her, and she just felt stuck, like she was living her life in fear. But she worked really hard to get her life back to normal despite all of the craziness, and eventually she remarried, and Douglas and Matthew got older, and they had some problems of their own that we'll talk about in a minute. And then in 2003, so 10 years after Richard's disappearance, there were no leads, no one had heard from him, no one had seen him. He literally just vanished off the face of the planet. So police actually pronounced him dead because they were like, chances of him being found alive after this long are pretty slim to none. And then things get even crazier in 2016. Linda has settled into her new life by this point. She's finally moved on from that traumatizing point in her life, and then she gets a call from Detective Anthony Cardillo. He's from the Pasco County Sheriff's Department, and he asks her, do you know who Richard Hoagland is? And she was pretty taken aback hearing that name after so long, and she tells him, you know, yes, that's my ex-husband, but he passed away. And Detective Cardillo was like, well, actually, we have him in custody here in Florida. I mean, that would just be the mind fuck of a lifetime, wouldn't it? You think your husband's dead, and then 23 years later, it's like, psych, I'm still here, bitches. Like, what would be even going through your mind getting that phone call?
Were you at all glad to hear that he was still alive?
I don't remember that feeling.
So turns out Richard had actually been living under someone else's identity since 1993. He had a whole new life, a wife, a new kid, like the whole shebang. So basically in February of 1993, Richard left Indiana and he went to Palm Beach in Florida, where he rented a room from a guy named Edward Szymanski. Edward's son Terry Szymanski had actually died in 1991 from a fishing accident, and Richard had actually found Terry's death receipt while staying with Edward, and Edward had poured his heart out to Richard about his son, told him all about Terry, all about their life, and Richard used this to his advantage to go and steal his son's identity, which is just so fucked up. So somehow he used that death receipt to go and get an Ohio birth certificate, which I don't even know how that would work. Like, hey, here's my death receipt that says I'm dead. Can I please get my birth certificate? Thanks. But once he had that birth certificate, he used it to go and get an Alabama driver's license, and then he used that to go and get a Florida driver's license, and then he spent the next 20 years living under the identity of Terry Szymanski. He got married in 1995 to a woman named Mary Hickman, and they actually had a son together. He bought multiple properties in Zephyr Hills. One he lived in, and then the others he just rented out, and he even got a pilot's license all under the name Terry Szymanski. And Mary said that every time she would bring up his past or ask questions about his family or anything like that, he would always find convenient ways to avoid it. And she just had no idea. She had no idea his name wasn't Terry. She had no idea he was living under someone else's identity. I mean, what a mindfuck that would be as well. Imagine finding out the guy that you've been married to for all this time and have a child with is a big fat phony. And he's been living under a dead person's name this whole time, and his name's not Terry. Like, what would you be thinking? If someone told me Kerry wasn't Kerry and he had stolen someone's identity, like, I don't even know what I would be thinking. Or that poor kid. Imagine finding that out about your dad. If someone came to me and was like, yeah, your dad is not your dad. Well, he is your dad, but he's not who you think he is. It's just rough for everyone involved. But basically what happened is, after 20 years of living under Terry Szymanski's name, Terry's real nephew wanted to find out more about his family on Ancestry.com. He starts looking up his relatives on there, and he sees that Uncle Terry had gotten married in 1995, 4 years after he died in 1991. And he was like, wait a damn minute. After this discovery, they actually didn't contact the police for another 2 years because they were worried that whoever had stolen Terry's identity would harm them if they, went to the police or found out or whatever. But in 2016, Terry's nephew decided that he didn't want to stay silent anymore, and he went to the police and he told them everything. And in July of that year, the police went and arrested Richard Hoagland. And at first, he kept telling them that he was Terry Szymanski, and he would show them his license and he'd be like, see, it's me, I'm Terry. But then police pulled out Terry's death certificate, and Richard knew that he had been caught, and he confessed to everything. So up until this point, police were under the impression that he had run away and made himself disappear to avoid his financial situation, and because of the phone calls to his wife, they just assumed he was involved in some shady business stuff, and that's why he had to make himself disappear. But turns out Richard just didn't want to be with his family anymore. He didn't want to live with them. He wanted to get away from them, and instead of getting a divorce like a normal person, he went balls to the walls, faked his own death, and stole someone's identity. Like, this man is so dramatic. As I mentioned, his wife Mary had no idea. She had no idea his name was Terry. She was completely blindsided by the whole thing. So she divorced him. She fought for the rights to retain the properties, and she did get to keep most of them, but her life was just totally turned on its head. So police wanted to charge him with all of these things: identity theft, loan defaults, everything, and they set his bail at $25,000. $25,000. But then after reviewing the case, they realized that they actually couldn't charge him with any of these things because of the statute of limitations, which is just so dumb to me, because if someone's been proven to be guilty of something and they couldn't have been prosecuted any earlier, I don't see how you can just be like, oh well, we didn't know about it for 20 years and he got away with it for too long, so that's it. Have a good life. But eventually in 2017, Richard was charged with aggravated identity theft and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. That's it, 2 years. After all the distress he put his wife and kids through, he was sentenced to 2 years and was released back into Indiana by April of 2018. Linda felt like the sentence was unfair for the level of agony that she had been put through, which, amen, totally agree. And she also felt like it was unfair, not just for her agony, but her sons too, because, you know, it obviously had a really negative effect on them, especially Douglas. When he was in high school, he broke his hand and he was put on pain medication, but unfortunately he never got off them. When Richard was arrested, Douglas was actually in prison serving an 8-year sentence for drug possession, and he actually found out about everything happening with his dad, that his dad was found alive and all of that, through the TV in prison, because he saw the story, he saw a photo of his dad's face, and he just knew it was his dad. So while he was still in jail, he actually wrote his dad a letter, and it said, "For a long time I wondered what was wrong with me that would warrant someone being able to just walk away. I'm sure the big underlying question for everyone is why? What was so bad that you had to disappear? At a very young age, I lost a person I thought loved me. I had very low self-esteem, and that affected my drug use even more. I used drugs to get my confidence, since at times I felt less than I really was." So Linda sued Richard for $1.8 million for mental stress, divorce proceedings, and unpaid child support, because he obviously hadn't paid a cent towards Matthew or Douglas for the last 20 years. And in June of 2018, a judge ruled that Richard owed Linda, Douglas, and Matthew $1.86 million. But because Richard's finances weren't good, you know, he was in jail, he was going through divorce proceedings with Mary, and his assets were all frozen, it's likely that they will never see any of that money. But that's everything for this case. That's all of it. It's definitely a crazy one, so I would love to hear your thoughts. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on this one. I mean, what a mindfuck for so many people, for his wife, for his kids, for his other wife, for his other kid, for Terry Szymanski's family, who found out that somebody had stolen their dead relative's identity. And what, all because he just didn't want to get a divorce? Like, I don't really understand. It just seems like such a dramatic thing to do. I mean, these poor women are definitely going to have trust issues. Linda had to go through so much. Like, she felt so unsafe for so many years because of this, because she didn't know what the deal was. She thought that something bad had happened, or that he was in cahoots with some bad people and that they were after her. And the police were looking into her too. Like, it just insane. Like, this is insane. It's just such a crazy case. But that's everything. Like I said, I would really love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below and talk about this case with you guys, because it is wild. I hope you guys have an incredible rest of your day, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.